Hello and welcome to the CBLP program, Resources and Assistance. I'm Rachel Toker, President of Urban Ecosystem Restorations and the host of today's program. Today's webinar is offered in connection with UER's Short Street Nature Preserve and Play Space project at the Lakelands community in Gaithersburg. This webinar is being offered for free through a partnership of the Chesapeake Bay Trust, the City of Gaithersburg, the Lakelands Community Association, UER, and the Chesapeake Bay Landscape Professional program. Please introduce yourself in the chat and let us know why you decided to attend today. By way of background, UER is an urban land trust that creates, protects, and aggregates what we call eco-functioning spaces. And then we teach people to engage with these spaces in ways that respect nature while enabling people to thrive. The core purpose of today's program is to explain how the CBLP certification program works, what its credential signifies, the problem it was created to address, and the gap in the market that it seeks to fill, how you can find the licensed professionals that you need through CBLP resources, and how you can become a CBLP yourself. Before we get there, I want to place this in context by introducing the Short Street Nature Preserve project, setting a baseline understanding of ecosystem science and ecosystem health, discussing the unhealthy state of our local ecosystems and the problems that we're here to address, and then pointing us in the direction of solutions that we can all implement, in many cases with the help of the CBLP program. So briefly, the Short Street Nature Preserve project is a small triangular section of open space within the Lakelands Community Association's purview. This is actually a stormwater basin that collects the stormwater runoff from the surrounding 1.2 acres of housing and built space around it. We are transforming this space into what we call it. So here's a view of the plot where this space is located. You can see that it's surrounded by 3 streets and housing. Our plan is to turn this area into an eco-functioning space that will incorporate nature play features and allow the community to immerse itself in a small patch of restored nature. It's now installed but dormant in its infancy, but we can't wait to see it start blooming in the coming year. So just to put us in context and set a baseline understanding for what ecosystems are and when they're healthy, I want to start by placing us in context. Every piece of land and every one of us is part of a larger landscape and a set of differently sized ecosystems. As you think about your yard or spaces that you use or inhabit, remember that that area is part of a larger landscape. And part of a larger set of natural ecosystems that are interacting with each other. So let's review what an ecosystem is. Ecosystems are the natural systems in which we live. They are dynamic and complex. They're defined by the functional relationships among individuals, their communities, and their non-living environment. So to break that down, within an ecosystem, we see movement and transformation of matter and energy, including water and nutrients, across land, air, and water bodies above and below the ground surface. There are a mix of plant species that have a history of coexisting in communities together. These are the native plants to the area, with animals that have evolved to live in those plant communities, and they all together drive matter and energy through the system. These interactions contribute to the healthy function of each system itself and the larger ecosystems in which they're housed. Ecosystems, just like our bodies, like our nervous system, are all performing their own particular functions while interacting with each other. and working together to make our bodies work as a whole. Ecosystems create the context and the circumstances that we all need to live, grow, and survive through future generations. Damaging or destroying these relationships can destroy the system entirely. So to just quickly look at the key drivers and indicators of ecosystem health, you can see here what is a snapshot view into a healthy ecosystem in the Piedmont area of the Mid-Atlantic, where there is biological and genetic diversity, meaning diverse forms of plant and animal life, interaction diversity, which is where species interact either by helping each other, they feed off of each other, they help each other reproduce, they protect each other in adverse circumstances. There's structural diversity, meaning that there are plants and animals that occupy different niches in the space, regular cycling of materials and energy, including decomposition and composting of dead material, and generational succession, where you can see young vegetation under old vegetation, and we can assume that animal species are reproducing in this space. So when you're out and about, please take a look at these drivers and indicators of ecosystem health and see what you can find in the open spaces around you. So let's look at current common and predominant urban and suburban land covers today in light of the drivers of healthy ecosystems. What we see are land covers that include buildings, pavement, compacted soils, cultivated turf, artificial grass, and invasive species. And so what we see, especially in urban and suburban development, as we move from left to right, is a loss of structural diversity, interaction and diversity, genetic diversity, and cycling of matter and energy through the system. When we zoom out and look at this at a regional and state scale, we can see that this is dismantling our native ecosystems. And so we have to wonder, why does that matter? Is that really such a big problem, and why should I care about it? Well, at core, if we just look at what we call regulating ecosystem services, things like outdoor temperature management or control, or clean air, or clean water, or flood management, or carbon absorption and sequestration, or the maintenance of food webs, these all break down as ecosystems break down. And these ecosystem services are essential for urban societies to operate on a daily basis. They are the need to haves that when we try to perform them without nature's help, we either spend tremendous amounts of energy and cost, or we don't really approximate what nature can do on its own. And so in Gaithersburg, as in many cities around the Mid-Atlantic, as we break down our ecosystems, we see flooding. The water does not infiltrate, the hydrologic cycle is disturbed, and we get all kinds of pollutants running into our waters. And in Gaithersburg, and particularly the Lakelands community and the Kentlands community, these pollutants land in the Muddy Branch, which is a tributary of our water source. So as we look towards solutions, let's just quickly, so we recap on sort of what we're doing here today, which is that we need the drivers of ecosystem health to produce healthy ecosystems that produce our ecosystem services. And it's our land that we have and that we spend our time around, urban land, where the drivers of ecosystem health either exist or don't exist. And that's where we come in, and UER comes in with the notion of creating eco-functioning spaces in our yards, in our common areas, and our urban lands so that we can start to restore the drivers of healthy ecosystems. And with that, I will stop sharing and turn us over to Beth Ginter, who leads the CBLP program.
All right, thanks so much, Rachel. I'm happy to be with you today, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the work that I do. My name is Beth Ginter. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit organization. We're based in Maryland, and we work across the Mid-Atlantic region, the Chesapeake Bay watershed, which, if you don't know, is parts of 6 states plus all of the District of Columbia. And our organization is the Chesapeake Conservation Landscaping Council. So we're focused on providing training and education, primarily for landscape professionals along their career pathway, from their very beginning entry level up to advanced professional training. And a lot of our work is built on collaborations, partnerships, community, and ensuring equity, diversity, and justice in our work. And our subject matter is all of the things that Rachel talked about as they relate to the landscape. And so we cover topics like native plants, habitats, soils, invasive species management, and how implementing these in the landscape can make dramatic impacts on our environment as a whole. So we kind of wrap this all into the nomenclature of green infrastructure and nature-based solutions, all pointing towards climate resiliency. So this graphic gives you a good overview of what the Chesapeake Bay watershed looks like. It's a very large area, about 64,000 square miles. And we're in a really unique area in this part of the country. We have not only some incredible ecology in our region, but also a really unique regulatory environment. And that is all built on the Chesapeake Bay Program Agreement, which is a voluntary agreement of all the states and the District of Columbia, which is focused on reducing pollution entering the Chesapeake Bay. So here in the Bay, there's lots of negative things that can impact our local waterways as well as the Bay. But our focus from a regulatory perspective here in the Bay region is on reducing sediment. So that's that erosion that you see in your local streams. When your streams are eroding, all that sediment is washing into the Bay and causing negative impacts. And then the two other pollutants are nitrogen and phosphorus. So we have seen here, especially in the DC region, lots of interest in mitigating the negative impacts of stormwater on our local waterways as well as the Bay. And lots of those things are things that you can do in your own backyard. So the focus of our work is really empowering landscape professionals to understand these specialized practices, which can help to clean up the Bay. So this is the underpinning of all the work that we do. This little book is basically a primer on conservation landscaping. And these bullet points here on the right side of the screen are the things that we have defined in this document as the 8 essential elements of conservation landscaping. So we're right in the middle of an upgrade. A new edition of this book is coming out in 2023. This edition is from 2013, but you can find it online. So the link there on the screen is to our website, and it's a free download from there. You can also buy it on Amazon. I think it's about $5, including shipping. So our focus is really looking at the landscape from a holistic perspective. A lot of the work, as I was alluding to there in the last slide, is driven by stormwater. And we have a lot of funding options and resources here in our region to help us get some of these conservation practices that mitigate the negative impacts of stormwater. lots of resources to get those things in the ground. But it's really not just about the water. And as Rachel talked about, the importance of a healthy ecosystem is a much bigger picture. So these are some of the things that we promote in all of the work that we do. These are some of the practices which we cover in a lot of our training, and this all falls under the banner of green infrastructure or stormwater BMPs or best management practices. So these are just some of the practices that you would find in this category. These are common ones that are happening in our region, and which are landscape scale practices that professionals as well as homeowners may be implementing. And so in our training, we are really encouraging landscape professionals to dig deeply into these specialized practices. Taking care of these practices, designing them, installing them is a bit different from installing the typical traditional suburban landscape. So these are some of the things that we teach in our training, and overall really getting people to think about the impact that they're having on the landscape and how they can do things with a more sustainable mind. So just a quick pause, if you will, to talk a little bit about plants and the type of plants that we're choosing for all of our landscapes are incredibly important. So in our work, we advocate the use of native species that are well adapted for use in our region. Here's a graphic that just gives you one of the many reasons that we like to use native plants, and this really speaks to the stormwater topic. So you can see there on the left some different types of common non-native landscape plants and some common native landscape plants on the right-hand side. And these just shows you what the roots look like of these different types of plants. And you can see how much more intricately developed the native species root systems are. So this is going to do a couple of things. One, if you're planting these plants on a slope where you might have erosion, maybe you've got a steep backyard and you have a lot of runoff happening there, these plants are going to help to hold on to the soil which you have. And that soil is a tremendous resource. I think most homeowners don't think about the dirt in their backyard as being a resource, but it really is quite precious. So having plants that can help to preserve that on your site is very valuable. Also, the root systems play a really important part in infiltrating the stormwater. So when you have very deep roots, they essentially open up pathways in the ground, and that allows water to infiltrate instead of running off. And that's definitely one of our goals in this kind of more modern approach to managing stormwater. So here's just a couple pictures that kind of show you some of these stormwater practices. This is in Washington, D.C., and this is a rain garden or bioretention area. And you can see there that channel drain that's running through the center of the screen is actually funneling water directly from the street as well as from the sidewalk into this practice. And the practice itself is recessed. So it creates an area for water to stand. So essentially, the water is coming in there, and this allows an area for ponding, is what we call it. So there's a temporary space where water can be held in order for it to be treated. So those native plants play a really important role in removing the pollution from the water itself. Soil and mulch also can help treating pollution and reducing the amount of those nutrients that are getting into our creeks and streams. And then last but not least, these practices are letting the water infiltrate. So letting that water sink slowly into the ground, that's a really important part of it. I should just say this, in case you're wondering what we're looking at here. This is a residential rain garden, and you can see pretty small garden that is collecting water from the downspout there. And this is actually a demonstration site. This is at a public school in Virginia Beach. And here is one of our classes. We're actually testing out the water that is running into, these are permeable pavers. So this is actually 3 different types of permeable pavement where there is pore space in between the pavers or the concrete, and that allows water to infiltrate instead of running off. There you go. So just a couple things that I thought might be helpful for this audience of homeowners. One is, these are things that you can do pretty easily in your backyard as you're kind of changing your mindset about how we garden at home. So one is just simply introducing more native species into your landscape. Starting to think about stormwater as a resource instead of something to get rid of. Traditionally, we have all wanted the water away. And of course, we don't want it coming into our basements, but there are many ways that you can use it creatively and effectively on your site. And then also thinking about your maintenance and what the inputs that are required for maintaining your landscape. Are you using a lot of gasoline to mow a very large lawn area? Could you possibly reduce the lawn area and thereby reduce your maintenance costs and negative impacts? And then last but not least, this is kind of where the CBLP program comes in, and that's just to consult trained professionals when you need them. A lot of these things you can do on your own, but there may come a time where you need a trained landscape architect or designer or contractor to help you get the work done. And so essentially, we believe that landscape professionals have a really important role to play in this work. And they are impacting so many more acres of projects just in their, in the course of a normal day. They might be interacting with a number of different sites or a number of different clients. And so the choices that we make as landscape professionals every day can have a big positive impact when they're doing the good stuff. So CBLP is our signature training program. We started and launched this program in 2016. Since that time, just about 1,000 people have completed the requirements for our level 1 certification. And you can see there the little bubbles. We have at the heart of everything we do are our professional certifications for level 1 and level 2. And then we have lots of other programming that we offer in addition to that, including some workforce development programs and specific one-time certificate courses on specific types of practices that are a little bit different from what most people learn in landscaping school. All right, and overall, our goal is really to address these challenges, meet the demands of all of our stakeholders, and engage and empower the landscaping community. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but our professional certifications, level 1 is a baseline credential that focuses on design, installation, and maintenance of stormwater practices and sustainable landscapes. And level 2 is our advanced credential in design or installation. And in all of our training, we focus on critical thinking, collaborative practice, and adaptive management. So these are some of the topics that we cover in our level 2 seminar. This is an intensive class, and we really dig very deeply into site assessment and protecting existing resources on a site. We delve into the math world of stormwater design and installation. And then we look at using naturally occurring plant communities as a reference for planting design. And these are just a couple of the other programs that I mentioned. We are teaching our level 1 program in community college. We have 2 community college partners in Maryland right now, the Community College of Baltimore County and Anne Arundel Community College have incorporated level 1 training into their curriculum. We also have some very specific workforce development programs trying to target moving people into the fields of green infrastructure, especially in the maintenance field. And then aside from our live trainings, we do have a lot of resources that we've developed and created, and many of those are available through our website. We offer all kinds of different trainings on a kind of ad hoc basis, depending on where we see demand and when there are maybe new topics that our community of certified professionals may be asking for additional training on a given topic. And then an important part of our work is also helping people like you connect with the certified pros. So we do have a directory on our website, and everyone who has completed the requirements for level 1 certification is able to create a profile on our directory website. So you can see that link there, cblpro.org/directory. That is where you will be able to search for a certified professional to assist you. And we also do create these lists of certified pros near you. So I think that list on the screen here is a couple of years old, but we put that together in response to a request from one of our local government partners on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, they were hosting an event for the public and wanted homeowners to be able to connect with certified pros. So we just put together these lists. So it makes it easy for people and they don't have to search the website. So that's about the extent of my presentation. And just want to say thank you so much to Rachel for having me here. Our work is an incredibly collaborative process, and we have benefited from a wealth of partnerships from our local and state governments, as well as educators, trade organizations, and watershed groups who are supporting our program, helping to connect our certified professionals with employment opportunities and clients. And we're also very grateful to our many funders who have supported our work over the course of the last several years. So that's what I have for you all today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much, Beth. I think this was really helpful. And yes, we're well open to questions about any part of the presentation.
Apologies for coming in late. I got sidetracked with like 5 different things. The only question I really have is your level 1 training. How long is it?
So we teach it in a couple different ways. Since the pandemic, we've morphed basically everything that we do. It was designed as a 2-day in-person training. We are still teaching it in person, but we also do a hybrid, so people can choose to do their classroom portion online, and then everyone does at least 1 day in the field. So the field training has been a really important component of all of our classes, because it's just really helps people to get out and to see what these practices look like, and to hear from professionals who have experience in the design, installation, and maintenance.
Thanks.
And I'll ask a question
Sure.
while people are thinking about more. So if somebody has a project that they sort of know roughly what they want, or they think they know what they want, and but they're not sure sort of where to start or how to find a CBLP, what do you suggest for them?
Yeah, so I would suggest going to the website, to our directory, and doing a search there. You can search by your area or by zip code, and that should bring up a list of certified pros. I would also just say, like, feel free to reach out to me if you're having a hard time. One thing that's happened here in the DC area is that this work has gotten a lot of traction. I think especially since the pandemic, a lot of people were at home and decided to make changes to their home landscape. So people in this field are extremely busy, and that's a very good thing, but it can be really frustrating for homeowners. I actually know a lot of these contractors, and Sometimes I have a hard time getting their attention. So if you are having problems finding someone, like my email is in those slides, and I'm happy to chat with people if they have a question.
And could you explain a little bit more about the difference between CBLP 1 certification and CBLP 2 so people know?
Yeah, so level 1 is really this baseline, and it's appropriate for lots of different people. And in fact, we designed this training specifically for landscape professionals, but we found a lot of interest from others. So related people working in related fields. We do have a lot of nonprofit staff that come through our training, and local and state governments as well. And it's really a very broad introduction to a very large field. And so we do have a lot of resources that we share with people in addition to the 2-day training. And there's a self-study component before you come to class, and there's all this material which we've prepared for you, plus some additional resources. And then there's, a self-study component. And that it depends on who the person is taking the class and where they're coming from. For some people, that self-study is pretty quick and easy, and other people spend a lot more time preparing. And then there is a written test, which is the certification exam. So you have to pass that exam in order to have the credential. We also have a requirement for continuing education. So if you'd like to stay certified after 2 years, you need to complete some continuing education courses. And those can be things that we organize or things that others are organizing, and log those in order to maintain your certification. So there is that expectation that if you're contacting one of these professionals, that you're going to get someone who is up to date on what's going on in this field. So that's level 1, and that's our most popular class. We've had by far, I think we have had about 1,200 people in the class take the class, and about 1,000 of them went ahead and took the test and passed. Some people, if you work for a local government, you might not need to have the credentials, so you might not ever go take the test, and that's fine. And then level 2 is it's a much more rarefied club, if you will. We have, I think, about 150 people who've completed level 2. It's an intense class. It's a lot of work, and really focused in on design and installation. So we don't really cover maintenance in this course specifically. It's really designed for people who are doing the design or actually building these practices.
And so it's worth asking your landscape company or crew, to the extent you have one, if they're CBLP certified, at least at the level 1. The nice thing about level 1 is it does include this sort of maintenance component, because a lot of times what might happen is an installation will happen very, under a design plan, maybe under the supervision of a designer or a landscape architect, but the maintenance usually isn't. And so if your people on the ground don't know how to maintain your native landscape, and it sounds like it shouldn't be a problem, but it actually is a huge problem, because most traditional people who are trained in traditional landscape cannot recognize native plants other than as weeds. And so there is a long sordid history of people of all ilk, whether it's homeowners or maintenance crews, pulling up sustainable landscapes thinking that they're weeds. And so it is very important to make sure that the people who are maintaining your landscape, whether it's yourself or somebody else, knows what's in there and knows what's supposed to be in there and knows how to care for native plants.
Yeah, I cannot agree with you more, Rachel. I like that there's a lot of very sad stories about very large investments in these specialized landscapes that were wrecked by a landscape crew, a maintenance crew who just didn't know what it was or didn't know how to manage it. And so that's really, we're about trying to change that. And so if you're looking to hire a landscape professional, like, you can always ask them Here in the DC area, we have at least 3, often 4 classes a year, and additional classes around the watershed that are available to people. And yeah, so we're seeing really a lot of interest in our training. I think landscape professionals are very hungry for this information, and we've been really excited about the opportunity to work with so many great people, and just you know, we learn something every day.
I will also just vouch for those who are DIY or do it yourself gardeners, the Principles of Conservation Landscaping book that Beth mentioned. And there's also a flip. Beth, you can help me with the plants with the flip book with some of the most important native plants, and it has these great kind of simple and easy to understand resources about where it goes, what kind of, you know, whether it likes to be wet, whether it wants to be dry, whether it can handle slopes, what kind of biodiversity it supports. And I'm going to let Beth say the name of the resource, but I can't recommend that enough for people, especially who are kind of home gardening and doing their own work. Beth, can you help me with
Yes,
that?
so we affectionately call that our safari cards, but it's native, it's basically the best native plants for stormwater, vegetated stormwater practices, and it's available on our website as well. We wrote it targeted to a landscape maintenance crew audience. We did not want people to have an advanced degree to use this resource. And so it's turned out to be extremely appropriate for homeowners as well. And we did it because we kept hearing in our classes, what plants should we put in there? So it was a really common question. And so we pulled together some native plant experts from Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, and they kind of came up with this list of the top native species for our region.
So is any kind of soil testing required before you plant natives, or are they the types of plants that will grow anywhere in any kind of soil?
It's really a good idea to do a soil test. And I think we encourage people in our training, we talk a lot about soil because it's so important. And I think it's underappreciated. And, you know, you're not just looking at the nutrients that are available in your soil, but you're also looking at infiltration and soil texture and how is water moving through that soil. It's so important when you're talking about water. And definitely if you're planning any kind of a stormwater practice, like a rain garden or permeable pavement, you really need to be looking at the infiltration rate and how quickly that water is going to move. Because sometimes you might have a site where your water is not going to infiltrate properly, and that might not be the best place to put your rain garden. There are ways around that, but it tends to get more exponentially more expensive because you're essentially going to have to engineer a way for excess water to get out if it gets too full.
And I'll just just to add, because for some people, soil testing may be scary or an impediment. And there's sort of an important difference between, you know, trying out some native plants in your yard and putting in a rain garden or an actual sort of stormwater management practice, right? So you can do a certain amount of planting after observation, you know, going in, feeling your soil, trying to get a sense of what's been growing there in the past, where the water's sitting. You can do a certain amount of observation without sending your soil away if you're thinking about trying out some native plants in a space, maybe even trying out a tree. It's very different if you're thinking about putting in a stormwater practice like a rain garden. And Beth, feel free to chime in if you feel
I think that's absolutely right. And you know, in general, native plants, if you're dealing with something that's truly native to here, wherever here is for you, then you should be dealing with plants that are well adapted, but you're always going to have sites where you need to dig a little bit more deeply and really look like, what's the light condition, how much wind do you have? And then you're looking at things, especially like just soil acidity. So like blueberries are a great example. I'm a landscape designer. I think I failed to say that, but before I was doing this, I was designing landscapes, and everyone wants blueberries, right? And they really need super acidic soil. So it's just not always going to work for you, and you better test it, because otherwise you're going to spend a lot of money on blueberries that are going to be dead, or they're going to be sad, and you won't, you won't get the benefits of those.
Yeah, that is the thing about sort of being less precise, is that you have to be ready to fail,
Yeah. Yeah, or you need to be in a situation where you can build some raised planters and totally put in the soil that you want to have. So that's another, depending on how ambitious your gardening is.
Okay, I have a question. It may be a bit of a curveball, so bear with me. So I live in Gaithersburg, in a neighborhood known as Lakelands. Recently moved here and said, okay. So I've been having conversations with various board members and property owners and things like that. And because what I've noticed is that while it looks kind of pretty, it's actually pretty hardscaped rather than landscaped. And I'm like, okay. So my rather, I don't know if you would call it simplistic solution, but it's the thought that has come to my mind, and it's actually based on a book called The Mini Forest Revolution, which I think is a great book. I don't know if you've read it. But basically the idea is to plant really tiny forests in lots of different places, wherever the, wherever the people and the land can tolerate it, so to speak. The training programs that you've been talking about, do they offer a context for something like that? A kind of grounding for, okay, I want to put this 200 foot by 10 foot forest, because that's the only land I've got there.
Yeah.
And it's just, and there's a very specific methodology to this. It's not, okay, we're going to just put in a whole bunch of pine trees. It's literally planting a whole, anyway, I don't want to go into all the details on it, but is what I'm saying making sense to you?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I don't know the book, but I'm sure going to go look at it. Okay, all right, cool. That's so we do, like, tree planting is a really important part of the work that's going on in our region from a conservation perspective. No doubt I'm preaching to the choir here, but I think, species considerations are really important, and diversity of species. If you were truly trying to create a forest, as you say, you're just not going to, it's not going to be a field of white pines.
No.
You're going to look at different layers in in that ecosystem, and ideally try to replicate what might have appeared in your backyard in Gaithersburg, before there was so much urban pressure. Within reason, some species are not going to do well, or they're not going to be readily available in the landscape trade. So, but looking towards natural communities as a way to frame our planning is a really important part of what we teach. And nobody learns that in design school. I mean, I'll say some people learn it in design school, but it hasn't been traditionally part of the curriculum.
Right.
So it's a different way of thinking. And sometimes we have people, we teach this in our level 2 class, and sometimes people are just like scratching their head. They're like, I don't get this. What are you guys trying to get us to do? And I have to really get them out of their brain, and the way they've been trained to think about it quite differently. So I think in a forest, it's not just going to be the overstory trees, but you've got understory trees, and you've got shrubs, and then you've got to have something on the ground. And if you have deer, you're going to have problems, because all those understory plants are like deer candy, not all of them.
So
Wow.
we've been trying to basically recreate forest through a process in the Short Street Nature Preserve.
Right,
It's complicated because, and you may have been on one of our other sessions where we talked about how sort of distorted the conditions on the ground are because of the engineering for the stormwater management.
right.
And so what you might have thought was the micro ecosystem for particular sections of the project are not, because they've been re-engineered. But I'm curious, so I have heard of mini forests, and I'm just I have not seen that book, but is it a product in, like, I've almost heard of there being kind of mini forest constructs, like directions, and maybe where they say or here's a pile of seeds and plants. Is that what it is, or is it just let's try to get our heads around the concept of recreating the forest, and what does that mean? Is there a product component in that in your book, or what you're looking at? Because there's actually a product somewhere in the world, I forget what it's called, maybe
Yeah,
Miyake
I just put the book in the chat.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
So I think there's an idea emerging around the world that maybe there's a way for manufacturers to basically send you a package that you can then plant and create a mini forest. I don't, and that I don't think Beth's program is kind of set up around that concept. And it's always tricky because this is one of the issues with nature-based solutions around the world, is we're trying to scale them up. And now the easiest way to scale up is to kind of create some kind of prefab situation where you can just plug and play. Unfortunately, nature doesn't work that way a lot of times, particularly in modified urban landscapes where it can be a very site-specific situation. So this is a tension that I think is really struggling to find a solution right now among nature-based solutions, especially in the urban space. And I don't think we've got it, but I'll be very curious to see the book.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check it out as well. And I always, I have read warning bells that go off when somebody says like a prepackaged landscape, because how could you possibly, like, I don't really like design templates. I really feel like every site needs to be carefully considered individually, and that we're doing a disservice to this concept of sustainable landscapes if we try to make it a cookie cutter process. But I will say, like, in the interest of getting a lot of, especially like getting trees in the ground, getting homeowners to be involved, sometimes if you can make it easy for them. I know of one nonprofit in Anne Arundel County that is, they have a very cost-effective package, basically, and they call it like a backyard bundle, and they have several different species that would provide you different layers. And they're all pretty tough, resilient types of species that are adaptable to many conditions. So I get what they're doing and I support it, but I just caution anytime that you start talking about templates.
Right.
Oh yes, got it. Yeah.
Right. The book that is based on the Miyawaki method, and it goes into significant detail about how each of these, it goes through a whole series of vignettes of how many forests have been planted in multiple different locations throughout the world. And of course, each one is radically different from every other one because the circumstances demand it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. So I'm just glancing quickly while we're talking, and it does look like it is grounded in native species. I think the most important thing from UER's perspective is what we talked about early on. Roy, I think you've heard it before, even though you came in late today. That we're looking for interaction interaction diversity, basically, that for the ecosystem, like ultimately, we want to ground ourselves into what is making our ecosystem healthy. And part of that is a historic coevolution of species, soils, and contexts. And so if you're not grounding in those relationships, then we're not necessarily heading in the right direction.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. See, I learned something new today. Thank you.
Well, wonderful. Well, we're just about at the hour. I want to thank Beth from the bottom of my heart. I think this was excellent. And we're going to be sending out the recording to all the registrants and putting it up on the website. So thank you for attending. And we please note that we'll be having our next webinar next Monday night. And that will be about the Short Street Nature Preserve and nature play model principles. So hopefully we'll see you then too. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Rachel.
Thank you.